All right, if you have your workbook, we're going to turn to that first session. We're going to talk a little bit about marriage for a few minutes and things that your marriage needs. We enjoy talking about marriage and having a healthy marriage is part of having a healthy family. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that means. Now, if you've been to our marriage workshop, we talk about a few of these things as we go. Lee and I are very, very different people. I guess we didn't know that too much when we first got married, but after we married, we kind of realized, wow, we are different from one another. And a lot of anybody else in here willing to admit you're different from your spouse? There's not anything wrong with that. In fact, I actually think we attract opposites. I think that's just a pretty normal thing for us to attract someone different than us. That makes us comfortable with that. But we're different from one another. And the first few years of marriage were a little tough on us because I thought, she's broke, she needs fixed, she needs to be more like me. And she would look at me and go, what did that boy's mama do to him? And I've got to fix him. And we spent too much time trying to fix each other instead of enjoying one another's differences. It's interesting how our strengths and weaknesses really blend together well. The things I don't do well, Lee does. The things that Lee sometimes struggles with are the things that I do well. And oftentimes I think God plans it that way in marriage. But here's a few of our differences. And as we go through here, I'm a be on time person. I like to be on time. Now, if you're a be on time person in here, can I see the be on time folks? There we go. It's about half. If you're a be on time, if you're not a be on time person, let me explain what this means. Being on time means being there at least 15 minutes early, okay? That's what it means to be on time. And I know if that's not you, that just makes no sense to you. If something starts at 9 a.m. and you show up at 9 a.m., be on time. People are late. We have to be on time. That doesn't always work in every marriage because not everyone is a be on time person.
Let's just say if running late were an exercise, I would be so fit.
There you go. We oftentimes on trips when we go do workshops and we're planning on leaving to get somewhere, we have, you've seen these people negotiate car deals where they go, will you be willing to do this? And somebody pushes back and goes, no, but I'd be willing to do this. We start that early in the day. Can we leave at 7? You know, and she's like, no, we're going to leave at 9. And I'm hoping she's just going to meet me somewhere in the middle there so that we can get there on time. I'm not a very organized person, just a little bit on the unorganized side.
Just a little bit.
Okay.
I'm pretty organized. I think everything has its place, and I want everything in its place.
I'm not a details person. I don't have to have a lot of details to function. Just kind of tell me when and where, and I can get there. I don't need a lot of stuff. I fly by the seat of my britches pretty well. It's kind of a gift. And she's not that way. I
need details. I want to know who, what, when, where, why, and how.
When it comes to introvert versus extrovert, I am an extrovert. And I love hanging out with people. I would love to have got up here this morning and ate and welcomed everybody and met everybody and find out where you're from, what you doing. That's just me. I enjoy being up here in front of you guys.
But I'm an introvert, and I'm pretty much still trying to figure out how he's convinced me to be up here in front of you guys.
Yeah, that's true. I like, just for an example, I like cereal, but I don't want cereal in the morning. I like cereal at night, and I want it in a big, big bowl. And I want a big spoon to eat my cereal with.
I pretty much eat cereal in a normal size bowl with a normal size spoon, like a normal person.
I like my tea sweet and my coffee black.
And I like my tea unsweet and my coffee with cream.
I'm a morning person. Mornings to me are fun. I was excited. I woke up this morning 2 or 3 times thinking wish the alarm would hurry up and go off so we could get up. And sometimes I go to bed at night thinking I just can't wait till we can get up tomorrow. I like mornings.
I'm a night owl. In fact, it's usually mid-morning before I decide if I'm even going to be a Christian for the day.
That's about 45 more minutes, so or another cup of coffee, so just be patient with her, okay? Maybe it's because I'm a morning person and I like to get up early, but if I had a superpower, It would be that I can go to bed at 10 and at 10:01 I'm asleep. Man, I can go to sleep fast.
It makes me so jealous. I am not a good sleeper. Some nights I feel like I just lay there and wait until morning.
I enjoy coffee in the mornings because coffee is good.
And I pretty much drink coffee in the mornings for the protection of others. I'm a neat freak.
I'm a little bit on the messy side.
And when it comes to shopping, I love to use coupons, read labels, compare prices, try everything on.
Yeah. I can get a whole new wardrobe at wherever we're at in about 10 minutes. Grab it and go. It'll probably fit, and if not, we'll take it back. But yeah, shopping's got to be quick.
And when it comes to toilet paper in our house, it goes over the top of the roll.
And until I got married, I didn't even know there was a right way to put toilet paper on a toilet paper roll. I just was glad it was there when I showed up. So those are a lot of our differences. Now, despite the differences that we have in marriage, one of the things that's important to do is to understand that the goal of marriage is making 50 years or 40, whatever God gives you on this earth. The goal in marriage is not to get married. The goal in marriage is not just always staying married. The goal in marriage is to have a good marriage. And again, as we talked last night, good marriage doesn't mean problem-free marriage. I want to look across the room someday at my wife when we're 80, if God gives us that many years, and think, we made it, we did it. And getting there is important. We've had 2 boys that's gotten married in the last 4 or 5 years. And while weddings are important, they really, really are, the wedding is so unimportant compared to the marriage. Our country and our nation has got this infatuation with weddings, which is fine. But we spend a year or so planning the wedding just absolutely perfect. And then a couple goes into the marriage and they've done nothing to prepare for it. They have no clue what's going to happen. And 3 months after the marriage, they're kind of looking at each other going, man, what have I got myself into? It is important that we invest as much time and honestly as much money into the marriage as we do the wedding. The wedding, it's just the wrapping paper on the outside of the gift. The real gift is the marriage on the inside. And we've got to be people that tell our kids and our grandkids and other folks that, hey, be prepared for the marriage part of it, because everybody forgets the wedding. But the marriage, that's the part that everybody will remember. If it wasn't for an old VHS tape somebody took of ours back in 1988, I wouldn't have a clue what happened at our wedding. I would hardly even remember it. But because somebody recorded it, I can go back and watch it. But people will remember our marriage. So set the example in marriage. There's not always a lot of healthy marriages out there that people can look to and go, hey, there's a healthy marriage. Be that example. All right? Work on that. That is kind of the goal of marriage. And so when we're talking about the one thing husbands do, let's talk to husbands first, all right? If there's one thing, husbands, that you could really use to do is to pursue your wife. And that means that you continue to chase her even after you've caught her. You say, well, when did I catch her? Well, when she said, I do, and you said, I do, and you said, wow, we are officially married. She is mine. Once you caught her, you don't stop chasing her. Meaning all those things that you did before you got married to win her, dating, flowers, holding hands, and things along those lines, you continue to do after the wedding. A lot of men, just because that's just who we are, our instinct sometimes is to go, I've caught her, why do I need to still keep doing all those things? And a wife has fallen in love with a man who pursued her, and we don't want in 6 months or 2 years to go, where did that man go? The guy that used to send me flowers and hold my hand and tell me I'm beautiful and take me on dates, where did he go? We need to do a good job, men, of pursuing our wives, even after we've caught them, even after they're ours. And that means getting up in the morning and going, what can I do today to show my wife that I love her? And I want you to take note for a second. That word pursuit is an action word. It's something you do. Paul, in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, said, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Paul tells husbands to love your wife with action. Meaning, show your wife you love her by doing things, little things, throughout the day. That doesn't mean Valentine's Day is coming up, in a few months, and we'll go out on a date and do something really fun then. No, we're not talking about just Valentine's and anniversary and Mother's Day. We're talking about regularly pursuing your wife. So let's talk about some things that you can do to do that, all right? Number one, date. Date your wife still. Date your wife still. Let me say one thing, and I'll turn this over to Lee, and she can follow up on some stuff here. It is important when it comes to dating your wife that even in small areas, we talked to a young husband the other day that has got kids at home, and they struggle sometimes to find childcare, to babysitting and things like that. And he said the other day, I realized it had been about 2 weeks since my wife and I had any alone time together, an official date. He said, so I called her one morning at her office, it's not far from mine, and said, do you have lunch plans? She said, I have an hour today to go eat. He said, I will pick you up. And so he went in and got her to her. He said, I went into her office and said, I am here to pick you up. And picked her up, opened the door for her, opened the car door for her. The closest place that they had time to actually sit down and eat and order and get back to work was a McDonald's. He said, that is all we had time for. But he said, I opened the door for her. I ordered for us. We sat on the same side of the bench and visited. And said when it was over, I took her back to work, opened the door for her, gave her a kiss. She said that was one of her favorite dates that we have ever had. Sometimes it may have to be simple, but making time for your wife, maybe even when the kids are in school, for lunch, finding time to date isn't just important, it's actually essential for your marriage. Miss Morgan, take over and give us 2 or 3 tips on dating our spouse.
We hear a lot from young couples that say, we just can't afford to go on dates. That dates are too expensive. And yes, dates can be very expensive, and we don't do the whole, get dressed up and go to a fancy restaurant, go to a big concert. We don't do that very often. That's that may be a once a year kind of date that we save up for. But just a weekly simple date like Trey's talking about, you can hit up some friends that have kids about the same age as yours and swap babysitting nights. Say, hey guys, would y'all keep our kids Friday night? We'll keep your kids Saturday night. And you swap babysitting. The kids think it's a blast because they get to go, spend an evening playing with friends. And then that provides free babysitting for y'all. And then the date itself doesn't have to be expensive. We've done things as simple as going to somewhere that has a dollar menu, going through the drive-thru, ordering something off the dollar menu, taking a blanket to the park and having a picnic. And then maybe we take a walk around the park when we're through eating, and we feed the ducks with some of our leftover bread. Simple date, but it's fun. Just do something that will get you just the two of you alone together, where you can talk, where you can do something fun. Double dates don't count. Because when you go on double dates, we're guilty of this. The guys sit in the front seat and they talk about guy stuff, and the girls sit in the back seat and we talk about girl stuff, and we're really not getting that one-on-one time as a couple. That is the real purpose for dating.
Yeah. And if it's possible, at all possible, it's awesome if you can do that once a week. If that's a struggle sometimes, then make it the goal of twice a week. Actually, use the goal of the twos. Once every other week, we're going to go on a date, and then try, in the next 6 months, we're going to go overnight somewhere. Some of you guys may have been able to do that and come up this direction, stay in a hotel. And then once a year, we're going to try and take a trip somewhere to remind ourselves that, yes, our kids need to see us being more than mom and dad. They need to see us husband and wife. But to remind ourselves we're more than mom and dad. We also are husband and wife. And to rekindle that flame as a husband and wife, because sometimes with kids, that's a very, very hard thing to do. Dating is fuel for your marriage, and you can't take that lightly. You've got to do that. You want to be affectionate. You want to be affectionate, husbands. Now, Dr. Willard Harley, and one of the little homework things we'll give you during the next break, says that according to his studies, that affection is most women's number one need. Now, affection is what I mentioned earlier, showing love. Now, it doesn't always mean that that's your wife's need, but according to him, that's most women's need, which means the leaving notes, the sending flowers, sending a sweet text message, telling her she's beautiful. All those things you did before marriage are all the things that she fell in love with you for that you still need to be doing. The sending flowers, the holding her hand, that sort of thing. You were really good at being affectionate or romantic before you got married. Think about all those times. You looked for opportunities to take that girl that you liked out on a date or to go spend time with her, and you would show up with flowers. You would tell her she looked amazing. You would hold her hand. You would do things to serve her, little things that you would try to show her that you were interested in her. She still likes those things. Those things are very, very important to her. You need to continue to do those things. Send that text, write that note, whatever it is. Be romantic. You might ask her, what do you consider to be romantic? Because you might be surprised at her idea of romance versus your idea of romance. I asked Lee a few years ago, we were driving down the road, and I don't even know what prompted it, but I just asked her, I said, what are some things that I do that you consider to be romantic? And she started naming off stuff that I didn't even think was romantic. She named off, I think she said, when you fill up my car with gas. She's not a big fan of going and filling up her car and get gas. So I'll do it for her. I'll kind of watch her gauge, and it gets low, I'll go fill up her car. She said, man, when I get in my car and I realize that gas gauge was on empty and it's been filled up and you've put it back, she said, man, talk about romantic. And I remember actually she named off 2 or 3 things like that, and I remember I used the word, because men think like this. I said, that's not romantic. Those things have nothing to do with sex. For men, romance is all about, for most of the time, it has something to do with sex. For women, oftentimes, those romantic things may not have anything to do with sex, if that makes sense. It may be running a vacuum or playing with the kids or filling a car up with gas or bringing flowers. And then I remember her response was something along the lines, oh, yes, they are about sex. You just don't realize it. Learn to be affectionate the way your spouse likes. So she may, my wife's not a flower. She's not a flower girl. I learned a long time ago that she'd rather have something else other than a big bouquet of flowers. That's just her. She'd rather pick, she'd rather meet. I made friends with the neighbor lady across the street where I would go over and I would ask her, I'd say, hey, can I pick some of your roses for my wife? My neighbor lady loved that I would come over and pick. She calls me every year and goes, my roses are ready. Come pick some for your wife. She thinks she's just a little matchmaker now, And the other day I get a call and she goes, my roses are ready and I have set a vase out on the porch for you. How you like that? I only have like 20 vases, but she made sure I had one. And I went down and picked some flowers for Lee and brought those back. But she's never been a big, don't spend a lot. She'd rather have something, something else.
It's not that I don't like flowers. It's that I don't want him to spend $40 or $50 on something that's going to die in a week. So she's
very frugal, and that's just the way she does things. But learn what your spouse likes. But I can tell you this: I can go to the grocery store and pick up her favorite candy bar and bring it home and set it on her dresser for her to find. And man, have I ever done something right. because I knew, one, what her favorite candy bar was, and two, for no reason at all, I left one sitting on her dresser for her to find. And so learn to be affectionate the way your spouse likes. One of the things that I've tried to do is I try, as silly as it sounds, well, we'll talk about it on the next one, but let me throw this out here for just a second. You've probably, if you've been in our workshop before, you've probably heard me say that I try really hard to open the car door for my wife. I've only done that in the last 10 years. First 20 years of marriage, I didn't even know it was a thing. And then on our 20th, I told her, sweetheart, I want to do something new for you. And I'm trying to figure out what you might consider to be romantic. I just want you to show you that I love you. And so I want to start opening the car door for you. And I told her, I need you to help me do this. She said, well, how do you need my help? I said, because I'm going to forget and I need you to remind me when I do. And I really knocked it out of the park the first, couple of weeks. Man, I was batting 800, 8 times out of 10, I was catching that door, no problem at all. And then I got a little lax, there was a couple of times that I didn't. And I'd look over, I'd be in the car about ready to start it, and she'd still be standing up outside, And I would thank her because that's what I needed. But I get the car door for her most all the time now. And I like that. But you know what I really like about it? I like the fact that my kids have seen me opening the door for their mother. And when we go out as a family, I rarely ever get to open her car door, because one of the boys have beat me to it. That they just know when we're out, somebody's supposed to open mom's door. They don't know why, but they just know that's what we do. We open mom's car door for her. And there's going to come a point somewhere down the road that them boys are going to get married, and one of them wives are going to go, did you know that your son opens the car door for me? Wherever we go, that makes me feel so special. And I'm going to go, yes, because they've learned something healthy from their dad about marriage. Treat your wife like a queen. Treat her special. Be affectionate. Find what she likes and do those things. You got anything else to add to that? We'll move to the next point. Treat your wife like she is God's daughter. This is an interesting point, and it kind of feeds right into the one we just did. But I said a while ago, treat your wife like she is a queen. One of the things that I have tried to do, we've raised 4 boys. You get a house full of boys and a lot of testosterone, and boys wrestle, and boys are rough, and boys are loud. And I'm not saying girls aren't. I'm just saying I don't know anything about girls. I didn't have any of those. But I have tried real hard from a young age to teach those boys. Our phrase was, and they can still repeat it, when they especially young, when they would kind of get mouthy with mama or take a little bit of a tone, I'd go, I brought you into this world. I'll take you out of this world. We'll create another one just like you if you're going to talk to your mama just like that, And they'd kind of roll their eyes, but they'll tell you that story now. Now that's a funny thing. But we learned from a young age, man, you do not treat your mama any way but like she is the queen of this house. And I love that I have raised 4 boys that love their mama, that would go to battle for their mama because they are good to their mama. That makes me happy. I've done something right in that. And so think about this for a second. As a husband, if you married a Christian woman, if your wife is a follower of Jesus, she is a daughter of the King. Therefore, she is a princess. And you have a heavenly father-in-law that if you don't treat your wife right, his daughter right, that I honestly think that he will hold someday some husbands accountable for the way that they have treated his girls. You say, where does that come from? Try 1 Peter chapter 3. If you want to write that down, 1 Peter chapter 3, just write down verses 1 through 5 in there. Let me quote you the verse. There is a verse in the Bible that says, husbands, treat your wives, I'm going to use the old King James Version first just because I like that, as a weaker vessel. What that means is treat her gently. Treat her like she is fine china, is what Peter is going to say. You treat her like she is very, very breakable, because she is. And he's not just talking physically. He's talking physically. You treat her very gently. I don't want to, I'm going to be really careful. You treat her gently physically, emotionally, sexually, all of those things. The Bible says if you don't, Peter says, don't waste your time praying, because God's not going to listen to your prayers. God's not going to hear what you got to say. About twice a year, whenever all the boys come home and this year it'll be Thanksgiving, and every other year we kind of swap out with the outlaws, right? This year we get them all in for Thanksgiving, and when they come home, Lee has some very special dishes that are very special to her in a very special place. And if she's way behind it and she is really in a bind and needs my help and trusts me with her very special dishes, she'll say, would you go get the dishes and put them on the table? Let me just tell you something real quick. I do not try to carry multi-handfuls, because I know how special these are to her. Does that make sense? I look for Legos in the floor and dogs that might trip me. I am just like carrying this stuff that might blow up, and I am gently being carried. Why do I do that? Because it is delicate stuff that can break, and it's very special to her. That's the same way it is. To God, she is a delicate, beautiful piece of china, and you be careful with it. Treat her like she's God's daughter, because she is. I told y'all, my oldest son he is out now, spent 5 years in the military, special operations, disappeared for a few weeks off in Afghanistan and running night missions, picking up bad guys. That's what he did, he and his team, and loved it. When we would get him home, generally they would make short trips, go over, make a bunch of missions, turn around, come home, and when he'd get to come home from Afghanistan, he'd get to come home in Childress for a few days. It would be just a time of that's over. Let's clear our mind before we got to go back to work and do it again. And we would have him. And if you've ever had a military kid or a husband or a wife in the military, when you have them, you want them as long as possible. Meaning, the on-time people, you don't drop them back at the airport 2 hours earlier. You pull up and they run to the gate, because you want them as long as possible. You want to see them, because you're not sure when they'll be back, And we had him home one time at a Christmas or a Thanksgiving, and we were taking him to the airport, and we realized we were running about 30 minutes early, and it was like, well, I don't want to drop him off early. I want to spend as much time as possible. And it was Lee and I and Taylor, and we stopped off at some little store to walk around and just kind of talk some more and visit, just to spend time. And I got to watching the clock, and me being the on-time person, it was like, ooh, okay. We are officially out of time. We got to go. And neither one of them moved. And I said about 5 minutes later, guys, we really got to go. I don't want him missing his flight. About 15 minutes after what I thought we should be leaving to get to the airport to drop him off at the door, I got a little bit of tone with Lee, a little bit of attitude, and I said, hey, we got to go now. Something along those lines. And my oldest son, from across the aisle, looks over at his father and goes, we don't talk to her like that. And I remember thinking, I raised that boy right. Didn't bother me one drop. It is good sometimes to be reminded by your own kids, hey, you're married to a princess, treat her as such. Very important that we do that. Number 4, pray with your wife and for your wife. We're going to talk about this a whole lot in a minute, so we won't spend a lot of time here. But I want to talk about, we need to talk about the intimacy that's in marriage. We have sexual intimacy, we understand that. We have emotional intimacy, and that's when you communicate and have conversation. That's very, very important that you have that in your marriage. There's also spiritual intimacy, and a lot of couples miss out on that. And that is where you worship together. That is where you pray together. That's where you read the Bible together. I hope, I don't know you, I know some of you aren't from around here. I hope you have a place where you go to church together with your spouse, that you're not letting your spouse go by themselves, that y'all are going together and y'all are worshiping together. That is a healthy thing to do. If you live in this area and you do not have a church home, this is a great church. You need to come check them out. Alex and Matthew are great, great ministers. This church loves families. You need to be here. But if you've got a church home, that is fantastic. But you worship together and you pray together. We like doing Proverbs. We read through the book of Proverbs together sometimes, and we'll just go through a chapter a day and say, hey, what stood out to you in that chapter? What can healthy to do. Pray together. Pray for your wife. Tell her I prayed for you today. Ask her, is there anything I can pray about? Before you go to sleep at night, grab her hand and simply say something. If it's a little intimidating, start with something simple like, dear God, thank you for my wife and our family. Bless us. In Jesus' name, amen. Just something that simple. But pray with and for your wife. That's a healthy thing to do. Help her around the house. Now, I don't know. Traditionally, we build a lot of our stuff is based on things we've done wrong. We're telling you don't do this. A few things that we figured out how to do. Our house is pretty traditional. I don't know what your house is like. I'll let Lee talk about this a little bit more. Our house is pretty traditional in a sense that Lee's the one that takes care of most of the cooking. And the house and everything along those lines. That may not be the case in your family. But when you can find little ways to serve your wife, that's a healthy thing to do. You can take over and do a better job on this point.
As Trey said, in our family, when our boys were young especially, we just made the decision we were going to cut corners financially so that I could stay home with those kids. But in today's time, it is becoming the norm for both the husband and the wife to work outside the home. And if that is the case for y'all, then really this needs to say more than just help her around the house. This should say, split the household duties equally. Because, if you're both working outside the home, that should be the way you do things. But for us, as Trey said, I would, pretty much handle everything. And I can remember a specific time that he came home from work, and I was in the back part of the house, and he came through the house looking for me. And he stepped over a pile of toys, near the front door, walked through the kitchen, past a sink full of dishes, came to find me in the bedroom where I was working on a big pile of laundry on the bed. And, we greeted each other, and he said, how was your day? And we chatted for a minute, and then he said, is there anything I can do to help you? And I was just irritated by that, because I thought, did he not see the toys and the dishes and folding towels, grab a towel? Honestly, he didn't. That's just not how his mind is wired. He doesn't see it, doesn't bother him. So I just had to learn, don't be irritated when he doesn't see things. If he's going to be willing to ask what I can do to help you, then I'm just going to give him a job. And when he does it, I'm going to say, you did so great. You're so awesome. Thank you. And he's going to ask again, what can I do to help you? So just, guys, be willing to ask what you can do to help. Girls, be willing to tell him what he can do to help, and be grateful that he does help. What else was I going to say about that? Oh, when you have little kids, little kiddos that are underfoot, and, guys, sometimes maybe you get home and she has been home all day and you're thinking, man, this house is a wreck. What did she do all day? Well, it's likely that she was playing dress up, having tea parties, building Legos, reading stories, and those kinds of things when your kids are little are so much more important than dusting and vacuuming and doing laundry, because those days and those years, they pass so very, very quickly. So let me just say, when your wife does have little ones underfoot, be patient and be more willing to step in there and help during those years, because they do pass very, very quickly.
Well said. Very well said. Number 6, be interested in things your wife is interested in. Ask her about work and then listen to what she says. If she has a hobby or something she really enjoys, take an interest. If she has a concert she would love to go to, maybe it's not your type of thing, go with her. Take interest in things your wife likes. That's a healthy thing to do. As marriage goes, the better the friendship of the husband and wife, the better the marriage. That's just truth. A good marriage is built on friendship. And friendship is built on 1, spending time together, and 2, mutual interests. So learn to do things that your wife enjoys doing. My wife is I don't know if this is a word, y'all probably use this word all the time over here. My wife's a junker. She loves antique stores and junk stores and garage sales, old stuff. Loves stuff. Has a little store in Childress that she has old stuff in. I've learned to enjoy junking. I mean, to me, she asked me one time, "You want to go to Trade Days?" It's a huge flea market down in Canton, Texas, and boy, it's incredible. And my first thought was, man, that don't sound like, I can think of a lot more things I'd like to do other than go, junking at a place like that. And we had the best time. I decided I'm going to go. I'm going to have a great attitude. She can buy anything she wants. I'll pay for whatever it is that I'm supposed to pay, and I'll carry all of her stuff. And she'd come up, she'd go, "I don't know." I'd say, "You just get it, I mean, I was the person there going, "Yeah, you need that. Get that. That'd be great in your store," or whatever it was. If you want it, I'll carry it, And by the end of the day, I'm like, hey, trying to get to the car that was 2 miles away, carrying all the stuff. We had the best time. We still talk about how much fun we had in Canton at the big giant flea market. Learn to take an interest in things. I've actually learned, man, sometimes I'll step in a garage sale and I'll go, "I need this, and I want that, and I want that." And I don't even have to call her going, "Are these things you're interested in?" I'll come home and she'll go, "Wow, you did well." I mean, that makes me happy. We had a church cleanup day the other day. We went out in our community and said, "Hey, we're going to run around town with trailers, and if you got stuff that needs to go to the dump, give us your address. We'll stop by and haul it off for you." And we're hauling stuff off for people in town, and man, we're loading this big trailer, and I looked down and I said, "Hey guys, is that an old door right there?" And somebody said, yeah, we picked that up at the last place. And I said, "I need that." And we unloaded that door. And they said, "What do you want that for?" And I said, "My wife likes that door. That door is going to make her happy right there." And I loaded that into my pickup and took it home. And the guys, the next time I saw all the guys go, "Now that man knows what makes his wife happy. Old junky doors." And I said, "See, that's what matters. She don't like flowers, but you come home with an old junky door, you done all right." And so learn what your wife likes. I showed up with that, and she said, "Man, where did you find that?" You learn to do things your wife likes to do. Be interested in things she's like to do. And if you just can't, at least learn to have conversation about it and ask questions and let her talk about those things. Those are all healthy, important things to do. Men, be the spiritual leader in your home. We're still talking to husbands. Be the spiritual leader in your home. Why is that your job? Because God gave you that job. I didn't give you that job. When you became a husband, when you became a father, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, we wrote that one down yesterday. Husbands or fathers, train your children. He's not talking about with baseballs and soccer balls and volleyballs. He's talking about spiritually. You be the guy in your house that sets the tone for how we do things. You model values and integrity. Your kids need to see that in you. You be that spiritual leader. God added to your job description, spiritual leader in the home. I want you to make sure you know that. All right? So you be that. You and mama together, if that's what it takes, but you be that spiritual leader in your home. We'll talk about that more in a little while. Number 8, we always put this in here. Very, very important because sometimes people just don't understand this point. And so we want to throw this out there. And of course, this is not always just a man issue. Sometimes it's a woman issue or a wife issue. But pornography, oftentimes, is $90 billion a year industry. Billion, which there's some issues with pornography, 90 billion. And if you don't know what billion is more than, 90 billion is more than ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox made last year combined. 90 billion is more than the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and all NCAA sports makes combined. That's how much the porn industry made last year. Somewhere there's some issues in there, and if porn is a part of your world, it's not healthy for your marriage or your family. Pursue your spouse instead of pornography. Pornography gives you a wrong sense of what the body looks like, the wrong sense of intimacy, there is none, the wrong sense of what sex really is. So pursue your spouse. Chase your spouse and not pornography. All right. So here's what wives. Do you remember some of the things you used to do before you got married that showed your, I guess it'd be boyfriend or fiance or husband to be, that you really liked him? When you wanted him to know that you were interested in him? Do you remember some of the things you used to do? I can think of 2 or 3 real quick. When you would go on dates, did you spend some time dressing up? And how long did you go in the bathroom and get ready to go on this date? And you really had hoped when you walked out and he saw you for the date, he would just say one word when he first saw you when you came out. Remember what that word was? Yeah, wow, you look great. He still likes it when you go on dates, when you dress up and look really good. Now let me give you an example for that. Men are very visual, and he was very attracted to you. He still is attracted to you. And I'm not picking on wives, this is husbands too. But before marriage, we're really good at if she's coming over or if he's coming over, if we're going out, I'm going to get up and put on a clean shirt or I'm going to look my best. Does that make sense? We wanted to look good. Now what do we do when we come in from work? Man, I cannot wait to get on my pajama bottoms and house shoes. I can't wait to put on. No, we don't dress up for one another anymore. We really kind of dress down for one another more often than we do up. So it's important that we take time when we do go on a date or something, wear something that your spouse is going to go, you look really nice in that right there. Another thing, ladies, that you did, you bragged on him a whole lot. You talked about how strong he was, how smart he was, that he could just do anything, and he liked it. Every time you were turning around, you were finding something else to brag on him about, and he still likes it when you brag on him. You probably tried to cook for him. Somehow, some way, you tried to find out what his favorite food was or his favorite dessert was. He still likes it when you do those things. Those were all ways you pursued your husband before you got married. I can think of another one. Do you remember that you used to flirt with your husband? And I don't know if that meant you just, touched his arm a lot or you twirled your hair or batted your eye. Whatever it was you did to flirt with your husband, he still likes it when you flirt with him. That hasn't changed one drop. So pursue your husband. Just like the husbands pursue their wives, you don't stop pursuing your husband. So let's talk about some of these, okay? Number 1, give your husband lots of praise. You did that before marriage. We're going to do it after marriage. Privately, publicly, meaning in front of people. Make sure he hears you at times going, kids, you got the best dad in the whole world. Look for areas that you can praise your spouse. Your husband loves it when you praise him, when you brag on him. He is fueled by your praise. Now let me explain something. I know you wives have noticed that your husband can do the smallest little thing around the house and come in and brag, hey babe, I took out the trash. Or, hey, sweetheart, did you know I picked up all the shoes out of the floor? And sometimes wives are like, if I came and told you everything I did around the house, I would just all the time be talking. But husbands will come in and they'll tell you the most minute thing that they did. You know why they tell you this? Because they love it when you praise them. They love when you go, good job, that's fantastic, well done. And they love getting praise from you. I honestly think, we honestly think that men's self-confidence and self-worth and self-esteem rises or falls on whether or not their wives are constantly building them up with praise or criticizing them. Meaning, you have a lot of power, ladies, to help build your husband up to be a great leader in your family, a great husband, and a great dad by reminding them that that is what they are. Give your husband lots of praise. He needs to hear that. They get out and mow the grass on a Saturday morning. You need to talk about how good the yard looks. And he's going to look out there and go, yeah, you're right, that does look good, and that makes him feel good, whatever it is. Work, and he may be doing something at work, and just go remind him, you do such a good job providing for our family, or you know your stuff, and that is so important. And that's all very healthy because your husband needs to hear that. My friend Randy, one of my closest friends in Childress, his wife is so good at this. And about once or twice a month, she writes something on Facebook about my husband's the best looking man in the world, or my kids have the best dad in the world. And I always think, man, I wish ladies could learn from Haley because she is so good about bragging on her husband. And Randy, he doesn't mean to do it, but he likes it well enough that when we're out running, the next morning or a couple of days afterwards, I'll say something about Facebook. He'll go, dude, did you see what my wife wrote about me on Facebook? He likes that. That makes him feel good. And he treats her really, really good. And one of the reasons is because she reminds him that he is a really good husband. She does a good job bragging publicly about being an awesome husband. You just can't overpraise your husband. Got anything you want to add to that? All right, number 2, give your marriage priority over your kids. That sounds kind of crazy. Let me explain what this means, and I'll turn it to Lee. If you put your marriage first, it will bless both your marriage and your kids. If you put your kids first, it will most likely hurt your marriage and hurt your kids. Meaning, you'll raise some self-centered children if they think the world revolves around them. You'll not teach them that marriage is a priority if they don't see it in your relationship. So make sure, God gave you a marriage before He gave you children. God created marriage before He created children. And a lot of times there is a spike in the divorce rate at about 22, 23 years, and that's oftentimes when that last kid leaves the home. And people have done studies and realized that they've focused so much on raising kids that they have forgot that they're also husband and wife. And when that last kid leaves the home, it's like, I don't even know who you are anymore. And the divorce rate spikes. So make sure you're still being married people. Take off and run with this one.
Of course, we want the very best for our kids. And we want to give them lots of opportunities to develop their interests, whether that's academically or musically or sports. And, we get them involved in all different kinds of activities. And before you know it, we're running them to this practice and that practice, and we're going to this game and that game, and we're volunteering for a concession stand, and, we're just running all day long, and our calendars are packed full, and maybe we work full time, and we still have to do, the cooking, cleaning, laundry, and you just find yourself dropping in bed exhausted every night. And if all of your activities revolve around the kids, as Trey said, you may, when the kids leave one day, look across the room and go, we have nothing in common. Everything we ever did revolved around the kids, and we weren't dating. We weren't developing those common interests, those things that just we like to do together. So that's important to do even while you're raising kids. You've got to make that time just for couple time, and your kids will survive. They will survive if they need to go to grandma's for the weekend, or they need to go hang out with some friends one evening so y'all can go on a date. And if you find yourself dropping in bed exhausted every night, that kind of leads us into the next point. Click on over. It's hard to make your love life sizzle. if you're dropping in bed exhausted every night because your calendar's so packed full of activities. Sexual intimacy is such an important part of marriage. It's a glue that God gave us, to keep us connected. And you've got to guard your time with that. I can relate. There were times when it was just, I was too tired. Just, that's plain and simple, just too tired. And so you've got to guard your calendar, guard your time, and make sure that you have the time and energy and you're not giving your husband your leftovers at the end of the day.
Yeah, very good point. No one is saying that you neglect your children, not at all. We're just trying to remind you to keep your priorities straight, that it's not just about raising children, it is also about finding time to spend together as a husband and wife. And one of the things that in the book Sheet Music, which we're a really big fan of, a book on sexual intimacy, Lee was looking at that, and
when we first got that book, I was flipping through, just kind of looking at the title chapters, trying to get a feel for the book. And one of the titles of one of the chapters was "Sex's Greatest Enemy," and so that really got my attention. And I thought, well, I want to know what he thinks, is the greatest enemy of sex. And flipped over there and started reading. About 3 sentences in was all it took to realize he was talking about busyness and weariness. We just pack our schedules so full that we just flat are too tired and don't have time.
Yeah, and one of the things that Lee mentioned a while ago is that, at the end of Genesis 2, where it talks about, and the two shall become one flesh, sex provides a connection between a husband and a wife that sometimes God created sex not just for two people to come together, but to two souls connect. The sex is so powerful in marriage. It is just a powerful, powerful thing. That is why God said when in relationships you get to know someone mentally, you get to know someone physically. Am I attracted to them? Do I like them? Or am I interested in them? You get to know them spiritually, emotionally, and then lastly get to know them sexually, because there's so much power in the act of sex between a couple, and especially a husband and wife. It's a connection thing, and we don't talk about this a lot. Churches, parents, people aren't really good about talking about sex yet. God is the creator. He wasn't bothered by it. It doesn't bother him at all to talk about sex, and yet we don't talk about it a whole lot, and we need to do a better job because the world's talking about it. We're just not. But the connection that's involved, there's a hormone in everybody's body called oxytocin. If you're in the medical field, you've read about this and studied about this. It's an incredible thing that God put in your body, and you have oxytocin. It's a connection hormone. It connects you to stuff. And let me explain how that works. When you have a baby, God dumps lots of oxytocin in a mama's body so that mama says, "That's my baby. That baby's going home with me. I love that baby. Don't you hurt my baby. Don't you take my baby away from me." God automatically tells the body, you connect through this hormone of oxytocin. You connect with that child. And you have oxytocin that you go, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. That's why I love my child. And another time when oxytocin goes into your body is when you breastfeed. As a new mama, every time she'd breastfeed, oxytocin would release in her body, and that mama would go, "This is my child. I love this child. I would die for this child. I would do anything for this child." A third time that there is a big oxytocin dump into your body as a person, as a couple, as a man and a wife, is when sex happens in marriage. Because it's God's way of connecting two people. This is my husband. This is my wife. We used to have pre-cell phone, we used to have cordless phones. Remember the cordless phones in your house that hung up on a base? and you'd recharge them and put them up there. And if you ever went too long without putting the phone up there, either the battery would go down on it and you'd have to stick it back in the base, or sometimes they would quit connecting, and all of a sudden you'd try to answer the cordless phone and it wouldn't answer, and you'd have to go hang it up for a second, and they would reconnect and talk to each other and like each other, and then you could answer and go, hello, yes, okay, I'm here now, sorry. That's how sex works in marriage. That's how God created sex. There's a lot of times in marriages where that is the way you reconnect with your spouse. It's, hey, we're not connecting, we're not conversing, we're not getting along, things just aren't clicking like they're supposed to. And God says you got to reconnect. You got to have a weekend away somewhere, got to have an overnight somewhere, and you put yourself back in that base and you connect again where you're on the same page. That's important. God has made sex to be a powerful thing. Here, let's talk about that for a second. All right, here's we talk about this a little bit in our marriage workshop. Here's 9 ways to ruin your sex life, and this is really for all ages, but especially for those who still have children at home. Number 1, allow your children to sleep in your bed. Now, we're not talking about a kid that occasionally says, hey, can I sleep with y'all tonight? Or a kid that shows up at 3 o'clock in the morning because they had a bad dream. We're talking about every night. That is not a healthy thing. And we've met couples. We had a little couple not too long ago that caught us after a workshop and said, we just need some advice. And we said, what you got? And they said, we have 3 kids, 5, I think 4 and 2 is what they said. And they sleep in our bed every night from 8:30 on. They said, what do we do? And my first thought was, you are in trouble. I don't know, how do you get out of this mess? And we devised a plan. Said, here's what we want you to do. Let them climb in your bed, let them go to sleep, and you go sleep in their bed. All right? If they come find you, you move to another bed. But you start working on getting them into their own bed. Because that bed should be a sanctuary for you and your spouse. So be real cautious about allowing your children to sleep in your bed with you. Don't make privacy a priority. That'll ruin things. This is one of our favorite little points that we like to make. We think every master bedroom in a house should have a lock on the door. And if yours does not, you should stop on the way home from this workshop and buy one, okay? If you are a contractor sitting here today going, I build houses, don't you ever build another house without a lock on the master bedroom door, because that is healthy for a couple to come in and lock a door behind them without worrying if one of the kids are going to walk in. It makes it much easier to relax. We've had small kids. We know what it's like to put multiple. If you in here has got multiple small children, that's hard putting them down at night, isn't it? It's like the whack-a-mole game. You get one down and one pops up. And I mean, it's like I never know when they're all going to be asleep. And when you think, I think they are all down, go lock that door and quit stressing over stuff. Learn to make privacy a priority. And when you get little teen children, you get to the point where you just kind of, you can't put them to bed at 8:30 anymore. And so you just kind of look at each other across the room and, oh, we are so tired, kids. We are headed to bed, and they'll probably say, it's only 9 o'clock, we're old. And you go in the room and you lock the door behind you, okay? You remind them, turn out the lights and lock the doors when y'all go to bed. But make sure that you do make privacy a priority. All right?
Another way to ruin your sex life is to let yourself go. God only gave us one body. Take care of it. Take care of the body God gave you. Also, when it comes to sexual intimacy, physical hygiene is really important, especially to women. Guys think grill smoke and dirt and grease is real manly.
Grass. I love the smell of fresh cut grass.
But ladies really like the smell of soap and toothpaste. That is sexy, guys. Soap is sexy. Also, girls, when it comes to bedtime, we're pretty guilty of grabbing that big oversized t-shirt that's so comfy. We want to sleep in that every night. And our husbands really kind of like to see us get something out of a lacy drawer every once in a while. And I think Trey's going to talk about that in a minute, about dressing with an aim to please your husband. But, wear something kind of nice for your guy every once in a while. when it's bedtime. Also, on this point, there can be some things in our past that have happened maybe sexually that we need to deal with. Maybe you need to see a counselor. And we don't always like to talk about things like that, but maybe there's some things that you need to deal with and you need to seek professional help, whether it's physically. Sometimes things just don't work the way they could and should, and we need to see a doctor. Sometimes you need to see a counselor. Don't let pride get in the way of things like that. Seek help and try to make things as good as you can between you and your spouse.
That is a great point. Great point. Yeah, keep going. Do another one?
Stop flirting with your spouse. That's a great way to ruin your sex life. Men love it when we flirt, ladies.
It's true. Say no more than you say yes. If you want to ruin things, say no more than you... Work on being one of those, and find a way to say yes more than you say no. That is really, really important. And I know that's not always easy, especially if you have small children in your home. Visited with a guy the other day. I thought this was good. This was a 90-plus-year-old man. And he had been married over 70 years. And he and his wife was at one of our workshops. And he said, I realized the other day I was officially old. And I said, how did you realize that? What was it that caused you to realize that you're old? And he said, well, when my wife said, do you want to go upstairs and have sex? And I said, you're going to have to pick one of the two because I don't have energy for both of those. I thought that was pretty good right there. A lack of communication. I want to say this again because I think this is really, really important. You know this, but we need to be reminded of it. God created sex. Satan didn't create sex. God created sex. He's not embarrassed by it. He's not ashamed of it. God created Adam and Eve. He introduced him to his naked wife and said, y'all go enjoy the garden. God knew what was going on. He was okay with that. If God is okay with it, it's all right for us to talk about it. We grew up in a time in families where, man, we didn't talk about sex, and if it came on TV, somebody said something, somebody's supposed to get up and turn that off. We want to grow up in families that do a better job talking about sex, that we introduce our children at an early age to hey, God created sex. Sex is wonderful. Too many times our kids and grandkids just hear, sex is bad. No, God didn't create sex to be bad. Sex is fantastic. It is wonderful when it's used as God created it to be. And they don't hear that message. Usually from a lot of folks, they just hear, hey, you don't do that. And then you get married. Now, they need to hear sex is a gift from God. And it's okay for us to talk about it. It's okay for husbands and wives to talk about it. So don't be embarrassed or ashamed of it.
And there are really good books that are written to help you have conversations like that with your children, age-appropriate conversations.
Oh, there are. And if you need some of those, we actually are going to update our book handout in this handout sheet. But there are some really, really good books on talking to your kids about sex if they're in elementary, if they're in junior high, and if they're high school, that you can get and talk to them. But if you start in elementary school, it is so much easier because then you can just give them what they need to know. And then as they get older, you just continue that conversation. It's a whole lot easier than if you wait and decide, all right, I guess I need to talk to them. And it's just do a good job at talking to your kids about sex. That needs to be a conversation that you need to have and not always an embarrassing conversation.
And as far as communicating with your spouse, sometimes it's hard to just bring things up. And we mentioned that book, Sheet Music, earlier. It's written by a Christian author, Dr. Kevin Lehman. And reading a book like that together can help you with those kinds of conversations that might be uncomfortable to have with one another otherwise.
We're pretty comfortable talking about, we've done enough of these that we're pretty comfortable talking about sex and things along those lines. And yet that book kind of gave us some new conversation in areas like, I guess we can talk about this. It is a really, really good book. I didn't think we could really get embarrassed anymore about stuff. And we were in the store the other day, And I don't know how. I think we were just passing through the intimate section and kind of stopped to look at some stuff. It don't bother us, we were, and all of a sudden behind us we had somebody come up and go, "Gotcha!" And we turn around as a little 80-year-old woman that goes to church with us and said, "I know what y'all are doing," and man, we can still turn red that we found out, that we can still be really embarrassed about that.
Number 7, make everything more important than sex, and we talked about that earlier. Sometimes we just get too busy and too tired, and we've got to guard that. Number 8, get stuck in a rut. It's okay to try new things. Read the book, sheet music.
Yeah. Make it all about you.
Yes. Let me just throw this out there with that point. We've put this on the list for women, that this is something that women need to, this is a big need for your husbands, but we have discovered that statistics show 25% of women, this is a bigger need for women than their husbands. So, whatever fits your marriage.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not always the husband's biggest need. Sometimes it's the wife's biggest need.
That is true. There's 3 on there that I clicked. You don't have to go back and try to find them. Be willing to initiate sex more often. Is that on your handout? Okay. Be willing to initiate. We put this on still talking from the wife's side. Be willing to initiate sex more often. All right? If that is one of your husband's needs, he likes it when you take the initiative. He doesn't always want to feel like, I think Lee always says, your husband doesn't want to feel like he's having to beg all the time, that he likes it. He doesn't know when you're in the mood. And if you're in the mood, let him know. And if you go, well, I might be in the mood, but how do I know if he's in the mood? If that's one of his top needs, if he is breathing, he is probably in the mood, okay? If he's got air moving in and out his lungs, he's probably there. You just let him know, all right? There it is. All right. It makes him feel desired, and your husband loves having you involved. So there's your 3 right there. Add anything to that? Let's keep going.
Go.
All right. Number 4, dress with an aim to please your husband. Again, we mentioned this. Your husband is very, very visual. Very visual. If you've been married for any length of time, you figured this out. He liked it when you used to dress up for him on a date. He still likes it when you dress up for him. So dress with an aim occasionally to please your husband. As Lee said, pick something out to sleep in that he'll go, "Wow, you look amazing tonight." Number 5, take an interest in something that he likes to do. His hobbies, things that he likes. Do you want to add a little bit right here on this? Let's mention the lady that, let's just talk about recreational companionship is what this is called. And your husband, this is, according to Dr. Willard Hartley, this is right toward the top of importance of your husband, a lot of your husband's needs, meaning he wants you to take an interest in what he likes. If it's deer hunting, if it's fishing, whatever it is, he loves if you would do or try doing that with him. In the book, His Needs, Her Needs, in the chapter on recreational support, Dr. Willard Hartley makes the comment and says, "Wives, why would you not want to be a part of some of his greatest memories when he's doing things he loves to do?" Whatever it is that he loves to do. Watching baseball, watching sports, whatever it is. And we met a lady one time that said, "I can't get my husband to do anything with me." And I said, "Well, what do you want him to do?" "Well, I'd love for him to go to a concert with me." And I said, "Well, what does he like to do?" "All he likes to do is deer hunt this time of year." And I said, "Well, have you gone deer hunting with him?" And she said, "Why would I ever want to go deer hunting with him?" And I said, "Has he invited you?" And she said, "Well, he has a long time ago, but he doesn't anymore because he knows I'm not going to go." I said, "I bet," this was a long shot. I said, "I'll bet you if you went deer hunting with him and enjoyed it or pretended like you did, he'd probably want to go to a concert with you." She said, "No way." I said, "Yeah, give it a try. Go deer hunting with him. Go have some fun with your husband. Tell him you want to go with him. After he picks himself up off the floor, you go and you have a good time." We got an email from her 2 or 3 months later. She said, "Went on my first deer hunt. And I wasn't sure where this was going. I thought she was going to say, I hated it, and that was the dumbest idea ever. She said, went on my first deer hunt. She said, it was surprisingly fun. She said, it was warm that morning, so I didn't get too cold. We watched the sun come up together and had a great time in a deer stand together. She said, thank you for encouraging me to go. And then she said, and we're going to a concert this Thursday night. He agreed to go with me. And I sent her a message back and said, I am glad that worked out. Your husband really likes it when you take an interest in what things that he likes to do. Pray with and for your husband. Pray with and for your husband. Maybe you need to tell your husband, hey, let me pray for us tonight. And you be the one that says the prayer or before he leaves for work. Number 7, one more, flirt. Flirt with your husband. You say, well, you've mentioned that twice. That's because he really likes it. We'll throw it out there twice. And in case you forgot how to flirt, we had a lady one time that goes, remind me, how do you flirt? I hadn't done that in a long time. And I thought, how do you not remember how to flirt? And in case you're here and you're going, I don't really remember how to flirt, give him a real kiss. Men know the difference between a welcome home kiss and a, whoa, that was a real kiss. You know, when he comes home from work, kiss him at a stoplight, someplace you usually don't. When you're out to eat somewhere, take your foot under the table and you just rub his leg for a second. He will love that. Now, if you're with couples, make sure it's his leg and not somebody else's. We want to make marriages better, not worse, okay? This is a great tool to flirt. Great tool. Send your husband a message that just says, man, I have thought about you all day today. I can't wait to see you tonight. You know, whatever it is, you send him some kind of message to just make him go, wow, I'm ready to get home, see her, you know, whatever it is. We met a lady a while back, and she and her husband were talking to us, and she said, you know, I like to go to the lacy drawer about once a week and pull out something and just lay it out on the bed. She said, I just take a picture of it, send it to my husband while he's at work, and with a note that says, this is what I'm planning on wearing to bed tonight. And she said 2 things happen. She said, number 1, he comes home early every time I do that. And the second thing, he always comes home in a good mood. She said, it's kind of worth it for that one right there, you know. And he popped up at that point, smiling from ear to ear, and goes, and I never can concentrate all day at work when she sends me one of those. So learn to use your phone to flirt, but be good at that, all right? Let's close with this story. We're going to take well, actually, we're going to go right into the next one. Is what we're going to do, and then we'll take one more break, okay? But let me tell you about Miss Claudia for a second, and then little short session next called 7 Things to Pray for Your Family. Claudia called me one time, and she said, my husband Pete has passed away. She lives in Childress, and I didn't know her very well at the time, but I did know her. But she said, my husband Pete died this morning, and she said, would you do the funeral? And I said, I would be honored to. And I told her I was sorry. I said, I'll be over in a minute. Let's talk. So I got to Claudia's house and just visited with her for a while and asked questions. I said, I'd like to talk about Pete in the service. And can you tell me some things? And she said, yeah, we've been married 55 years. And she just kind of gave me some basics of what he did. And we did a service at the funeral home for Pete. When we were done with the funeral, if you've been to enough funerals, you always know that the guy doing the service kind of stands next to the casket as everybody kind of walks out. Everybody had walked out, and somehow or another, Claudia was by herself as the last one still there standing in front of Pete. And so I kind of moved from standing at the front of the casket and came around and put her hand around my arm and said, I told her, I said, take your time. We're in no hurry whatsoever. So I stood there with her for a minute. And she looked at Pete, and she looked back at me, and she said, I want to tell you something. And I said, please. She said, I told you that we were married for 55 years, but I didn't do a very good job telling you what that meant. She said, we were married for 55 years, but they weren't just 55 years. She said, we were married for 55 really good years. And I smiled. She said, I didn't tell you this, but Pete brought me flowers once a month for 55 years. She said he brought me flowers last month. He had done it all our married life. She said, did you know that every morning when we got up, he would kiss me on the cheek and say, you look so beautiful today. And every night when we climbed in bed together, he would take me by the hand and tell me that he loved me. Every night for 55 years. She said, he called me Hazel. And I finally spoke and said, why Hazel? She said, my eyes are hazel, and that was my nickname. And I smiled. She kept talking about how good Pete had been to her and all the things that he had done for her. And then she quit talking to me, and she talked to Pete. She turned, and she said, Pete, thank you for treating me so good. I will see you soon. And she leaned over and kissed him on the forehead. She patted my arm and said, I am ready. And I walked Miss Claudia out to the limousine that was going to take her to the cemetery where we would have the last little service and leave Pete. I closed her door and I went to my vehicle and sat for a second. And instead of what I usually do, which is think, what am I going to say when I get out to the cemetery? The only thing I could think about, the only thing in my mind was, dear Lord, please, please, let us raise up more couples and more men like Pete. Men who will still bring their wives flowers after 55 years of marriage. Men who will still every morning tell their wife they're absolutely beautiful and kiss them on the cheek every night and tell them that they love them. I was inspired by a man I never really got to meet. But we need more Petes in this world. I want 55 good years of marriage like Pete and Claudia had. That won't happen by accident. It will require both of us working hard. All right, let's take our thing. On the schedule, let me see what we got right here. Let me just click. We're going to find out. Oh, don't do or say this. Here we go. Check this out. Can we get some volume? Actually,
You're not mad at me.
No,
You're sure?
I'm fine.
Actually, we'll get back to that in a minute. No big deal. Let's look at this for a second, all right? Just because we're running close to being on time, this is a good little session. 7 things to pray for your family. This is what I want to do for just a second is use this little section for you to sit down and go, maybe this is something you and your spouse can do together, but to use this as, hey, here's some things that we can specifically pray about. One of the greatest things you can do for your family, your husband, your kids, your wife, your kids, your parents, is pray for them. And it is really important that you do so and be specific on a few things, okay? Number 1, we want to thank God for our marriage, because sometimes the best way to keep your marriage a priority is to be thankful for it. It is not happy people who are thankful. It is thankful people who are happy. Let me say that again. It is not happy people who are thankful. When you're thankful for your marriage, you tend to overlook all those things that get on your nerves about your spouse. Does that make sense? When you are one of those people that goes, I'm going to focus on what my spouse does right. And when you're praying, Lord, I am so blessed to have my husband. I am so blessed to have my wife. Then you tend to notice the positives. Have you ever noticed newlyweds? Do we have newlyweds? Newlyweds? 2 years. 2 years or less, anybody? Hey, no newlyweds. That's awesome. All right, we'll talk about them then, right? Have you ever noticed that newlyweds are really good at noticing the things they love about their spouse and they overlook the things they don't like. Almost sometimes it's a little nauseating to some of us. Some newlywed will go, hey, how's marriage? He's the best, he just is so perfect. And we're like, yeah, give him a little time, it'll change. But they are so good at noticing what their spouse does right, and they overlook the things that gets on their nerves. You know what happens? You get married for 7 years, 8 years, 18 years, 22 years, and it reverses. You tend to be people who go, my spouse drives me nuts. You look at just the things that drives you crazy, and you overlook the things that they do well. You just reverse that. And that really isn't very healthy. You need to be noticing and being thankful for your spouse. And when you pray for your spouse, Lord, thank you for my wife, for all the things she does for me, then man, it's really, really hard to take them for granted when you thank God for your marriage. Number 2, ask God to bless your spouse and to bless you as a spouse, meaning, Lord, help me to be a better husband. Thank you for Lee, and bless her as a mama and a wife. And ask God to help you to be better at that. You may go, man, I really think I'm doing a good job. But you ask God. God says, you don't have because you don't ask. You need to do a good job asking. So ask God to bless you as a spouse. Check this one out. Ask God to give you wisdom as a parent. Ask God to give you wisdom as a parent. One of my favorite stories is the story of Samson. But it's Samson before he is ever born. Samson's got parents, and one day an angel shows up to, Dad's gone to work. Samson's daddy's gone to work. Samson hadn't been born yet. Dad's gone off. He's working in the field. An angel shows up to mama, and you know what the angel says? Hey, next year you're going to have a kid, and he's going to be a very special child, and here's some things you're going to want to do and some things you're not going to want to do. And she just kind of like, okay. And the angel leaves. Can you imagine that? Dad gets home from work that night. Husband gets home from work that night. Hey, how was your day? Anything exciting happen? How do you say, well, this angel showed up, And she says, an angel showed up and said, we're going to have a son. And we're supposed to do these things right here. And Samson's dad says, did you ask any more questions? And she goes, no. You didn't ask more questions on how to raise this kid and how to do this and how to do this and how to do this? And she goes, no. And he goes, let's pray and ask God to send that angel back so we can ask how to be good parents, how to raise this kid right. And so they pray, Lord, please let this guy come back and tell us more about this. And God does. Now, I love that story because it just reminds me as a parent, I may think, hey, I'm doing a pretty good job raising this kid. But you know what? Sometimes if we can ask God, God, help me to be a good parent, to give me wisdom. Sometimes the way we respond to our kids, whether they do good or do bad, is very important to our children. So it is important and essential that we ask God, Lord, help us. God says you don't have wisdom because you don't ask. And He also says, if you'll ask me for wisdom, I'll give it to you. Want to be a good parent? Make sure you're asking God for wisdom. Pray for your children daily. Pray for your children every day. You can pray for your family every day, but pray for your children. Did you know I have a reminder that goes off on my phone? And it goes off every day at 1:27. Now 1:27 is just we read last night, from Psalm 127, children are a blessing from the Lord. So that's my reminder. I decided 127 would be my reminder. So I set a reminder on my phone. Years ago, I told my phone, remind me every day at 1:27 p.m. to pray for my boys. Now I have actually changed that. This year I changed it to remind me to pray for my family because I have daughter-in-laws now. My boys know that I pray every day for them at 1:27. Sometimes I send a text and go, hey, 1:27's coming up. Y'all got anything you want me to pray about? And sometimes they send me, yeah, pray about this, pray about this, pray about this. Gives me an idea of what's going on in the world. Sometimes I just send a message and go, hey, 127 just went past. I want y'all guys to know I prayed for you. But my kids know I pray for them every day at 127. And I'm going to continue to do that because there's power in praying for your family, for your kids. And that is sometimes I'm going to be, I don't know what I'm doing at 127. Today I'll be driving down the road trying to get to an airport on time. And it'll go off and Lee and I probably won't stop. We'll drive and pray. I'll tell her I'm going to keep my eyes open while I drive. You can close yours if you want to, and let's tell God thanks for our kids. But if I'm by myself, if somebody's standing there talking to me, that happens sometimes, and I'll feel my phone just buzz in my pocket real lightly, and I'll go, it's 127. Sometimes I just simply go, Lord, thank you for my boys today. That's my prayer. Sometimes when I have a little more time, I'll spend a little more specific. But we need to pray daily for our children. Number 5, pray for your future as a married couple and family. You go, why the future? Because, man, you change. If you don't have any kids, sometime you probably will. If you have kids, sometime they're going to start school, and that's going to be a big change for you. At some point, those kids that are all in school are going to graduate from high school, and they're going to leave home. I've been praying about our future together because we're about to become empty nesters. We want that transition to go well. We want God to bless that. Someday, we hope, we're going to have some grandkids. And we need to be praying about that. We've been praying for spouses for our boys long before spouses showed up. We want the right spouse. We need to pray for upcoming future. And it's important to mention those things when you pray. Number 6, ask God to protect your marriage and family from Satan, and that you'll keep your priorities straight. Let's talk about that first little part for just a second. This point really kind of hurts my heart because every day, literally every day, I see Satan crushing marriages. And when he crushes marriages, he crushes families too. He takes he just pounds them. Sometimes it's marriages that you would think there's no way that marriage could ever get in trouble. Maybe it's a preacher and his wife. Maybe it's a church leader. Maybe it's a good Christian marriage. And you're like, man, Satan would never get that one. He has wiped some big ones out this year alone. 2 that floored me. Friends of mine that I thought, there is no way. 1, 6 weeks is all it took. 6 weeks. You go, how do you destroy a marriage in 6 weeks? Well, one spouse starts texting someone on their phone of the opposite sex, and that person that they're texting starts talking about, that person you're married to is really not how do you put up with them? They're not the best, And before you know it, that person's undermined that relationship. Within 6 weeks, they've moved out. 3 weeks later, they file for a divorce. This is a couple I thought, there's no way that could happen. You ask God. It was Jesus who said, when you pray, one of the things you should pray about is, Lord, lead me not into temptation. Remember that prayer? I think if Jesus himself said, Lord, protect me from temptation, that probably ought to be a prayer we're praying. Lee and I pray that prayer often. We ask God to protect us because Satan would love to wipe us out. And the second that we think, he can't get us, you better look out because he's going to. Man, do not think you are invulnerable to Satan in his ways. You watch because, boy, he is a deceiver. He will help you to not keep your priorities straight. He will get you to focus on your work and to focus on your bills and to focus on your hobbies and to focus on your friends and to focus on yourself. And he'll get you to quit focusing on God and quit focusing on your spouse and what's important in life. Number 7, ask God to help you see the good and not the bad. Help God to help you see the good and not the bad. We're real good at pointing out the things that our spouse does wrong, and we want to be better. Lee and I are going to talk about this in a minute, about glass half full and how easy it is to be critics instead of people who build up and encourage. So here's your list. You can go through this and you can work through it. You can sit down with this list, and while you have 5 minutes quiet time, you can pray these things every morning and ask God to bless your family. All right. All right. In this last session, let's talk family killers. These are all things that are very hard on your marriage, and we want to talk a little on your family, and we want to talk a little bit about those things and kind of get an idea to give you a warning if this is something that might be a part of your family that we need to work on and that you need to be aware of and everything else. So let's talk about these. Sometimes we don't realize what bad things are out there. Sometimes we're not sure where the risk is. I like this. This always makes me laugh. If you were to ask what the most dangerous animal in America is, what kills more people than anyone else? Not bears, snakes, sharks, wolves, or alligators, but deer. And it just points out and reminds you that sometimes the things that you go, that's no big deal, might be the bad things. So as we kind of talk about some stuff through here, these are all things that if you're not careful and they get out of control, we can get ourselves in trouble. So number 1, when we're talking family killers, when you live outside what you can afford. Remember we talked about last night that the average median income for families today is about $47,000, yet they have about $127,000 in debt, and it's very dangerous. The things, top 5 reasons for divorce, money issues are not in that. No one ever says, well, we're having money problems, so we need a divorce. But I guarantee you, in every divorce, 95% of them, they're having money issues. Money issues cause a lot of stress, not just on marriages, but also on families. And so you have to remind yourself, we don't have to always have the latest gadget or the nicest shoes or the nicest this. We want to live, if I can afford them, great, but we want to live within our income. Lee and I kind of had some struggles with this early in marriage. We really didn't understand the credit system and credit cards, and we'd actually put $7,000, $8,000 on credit on a credit card that had about 28% interest at the time that we paid monthly minimums on. We didn't realize what that meant, and when Lee finally did some figuring on what I thought was the greatest deal in history, paying $12 or $20 a month minimum on $8,000. I mean, you just can't get better than that right there. She explained to me one time, if I've done the figuring right, that $20 Dairy Queen meal we had a couple of months ago that we put on the credit card was going to take us about 6 months to pay off if we paid the minimum, and cost us well over $200 in interest. And I remember thinking, can they do that to us? And she said, we signed up for it. And so we worked hard. She worked hard to get us out of debt. And a couple of years later, she had paid off the credit cards and paid off cars. And she will still today, she always says, there's so much less stress when we don't have a bunch of debt hanging over our head. So be cautious about that. One of the best books out there is Financial Peace, which is a Dave Ramsey book, and y'all may have read that. I know y'all have heard of Dave Ramsey. Some of you, they may do a Dave Ramsey class at this church, but such a good program. We tell every young couple getting married, you need to be in a Financial Peace class somewhere. You need to read the Financial Peace book. You need to understand that debt is one of those things that gets you in trouble, that you don't have to have everything your heart desires. Don't live outside what you can afford. What happens if you do that in a family? You raise kids that go, well, my mom and dad did it that way. And so what's the big deal about us buying stuff that we really can't afford? And we want to raise kids and children who understand what it means to, hey, I have a car payment and I need to get that paid off. And I don't want to pay a high interest and I don't want a bunch of debt hanging over our heads. And that's all very, very important. This is us, not saying it's y'all, but raising 4 boys and knowing how boys drive, every one of them came to me at some point and said, Dad, did you know old Colton down the street got a brand new Camaro this year now that he's 16? And this was usually when they were 15, about to be 16, that they would tell me this. And I would say, I hope you get to ride in it because you're not going to get one of those. And I would remind them, we plan on buying your first car, but it will be a car less than $5,000. It will have a lot of miles on it, but it'll be reliable. The air conditioner will work, and it will have a radio in it because that's important to you. And if you tear that one up, then you're going to have to find your home after that. So be really cautious with it. And when you get out of the house, and when you're not living off mom and dad anymore, and you're done with college, and you have a job, you can go buy you a brand new Camaro if you want. And so we've done that with all our kids. And, I drive a 99 Chevrolet pickup. That's my vehicle. And I remind them, if I can drive a 99 Chevrolet pickup with 160,000 miles on it, you can drive, a 2008 Mazda that gets 30 miles per gallon that's reliable. It doesn't have to be the fanciest, newest thing out there. So learn to live within your income, what you can afford. Constantly being negative is also very, very hard on your family. Take over. Yeah.
This morning, Trey and I shared a lot of our differences with you. And another one of our differences, you probably picked up on it a little bit, is that Trey is a glass half full kind of person. He's very positive and very optimistic, and encouragement comes very easy to him. He's very complimentary, very encouraging, he builds people up. And I'm more a glass half empty kind of person. I'm a little more negative, more pessimistic. I tend to, be critical and pick out all the little things that are wrong. And so I have to really work on this in our family. It doesn't come easy to me to be encouraging and to praise my kids for everything. So if you can relate to being a glass half empty kind of person, then this doesn't come easy and we do have to work extra hard at it, but it can be done because it's very important in families that you build up and that you praise, because the world is going to tear our kids down, so they don't need to live in a home where they're hearing things like, you're a dumb, selfish slob, because kids are going to become what they hear. If you tell them you're a dumb, selfish slob, they're going to be dumb, selfish slobs. You've probably seen the movie The Help. I loved the nanny who, raised the little girl. Pretty much she raised her, and she told her every day, you remember the phrase she said? You are kind, you are smart, you are important. And those are the kind of things we need to be telling our kids every day. Tell them the things that you want them to become, and that's what they'll become.
That does not mean that you can't point out things that needs fixed. That does not mean you never can tell your kids, hey, y'all need to get your shoes out of the floor. It's just don't make that the first thing and the only thing that you ever talk about. Remind them that they are great kids. Remind your spouse they're a great spouse, that they did a great job. But then there are times where you may have to say, and don't forget to get your shoes out of the floor. Or tell them thank you for getting your shoes out of the floor. But constantly being a critic is hard on your marriage. We see lots of marriages that really, and family, that really struggle because a spouse, a male or a female, a husband or a wife, are just so critical of everything, and the family feels like they just have to walk on eggshells all the time because they never know what they're going to get chewed on about. So
we didn't talk much about love languages, but for some people, that's their love language. They need to be praised. And if they're not ever getting that praise at home, man, that's just hard. That's hard on marriages and families.
Yeah, that is true. Number 3, put your children before your spouse. We mentioned this earlier. I'm going to mention it again. This is really a struggle, especially for blended families. And we're going to talk about blended families in a minute, but especially for the people that struggle with this is people who have been abused by a spouse or cheated on by a spouse or multiple different people, and the only thing that's been faithful to them in their world has been their kids. And we can understand that, saying, hey, I will never put, all I've been with are men who have cheated, and I'll never put a man before my spouse. We understand where that's coming from, but again, God designed your marriage to come first, meaning we are going to work hard to be a good mother and father, but we are also going to be a husband and wife during that time. That is so important that we do those things. Again, we've talked about that, but we wanted to mention it one more time. Number 4, I'm going to try to do this without being too preachy, if I can put it that way. We've talked to dads, and since I'm a dad, I can talk to dads for a second. I like being my son's friend. I really like that. I like that they consider me one of their friends. You're one of my best friends, Dad. But God didn't create me to be their friend. He created me to be their dad. And so sometimes I have to step up and play the role of the father and not be passive. And what that means is sometimes it is not just mama's role to be the disciplinarian in the family. It is dad's job as well to be the disciplinarian. It is not mama's job to just be the one that's a spiritual leader in the home. That is dad's job as well. It is easy sometimes for us dads to sit back and go, let mom handle that. She can deal with that. No, I am not going to be a passive father. I am going to be involved in their life, and not just in the fun stuff, not just in the sports, not just in the educational part, but in the tough stuff as well. I will be a part of that. And you need to be a part of that. And that requires sometimes really hard talks as a father. Sometimes I have hard talks with my kids, meaning sometimes I talk to my kids about, even when they are adult children in their 20s with fiancés or serious girlfriends, and I remind them, son, God wants you to wait to have sex until you're married because that's how He designed it. Or sometimes I have to ask the other ones, is anyone tempting you at school to drink or to do drugs? And you go, well, those aren't too bad. No, they're not. Sometimes I have to go in and I talk to Cooper, who's still at home. And I say, Cooper, I have been getting these random friend requests on Instagram from women that really aren't women. They're fake women, and they just want me to click a site and go watch stuff that I don't need to be seeing. Are you getting these, Cooper? And are you making sure that you're not clicking on those, because that's not something that God wants us to do? And I have to have those talks. Those aren't fun talks, but that's my job as a dad, is to have tough talks sometimes, and talk and ask questions about, what are you doing on your phone? What are you doing on the computer? We have rules in our house. If you have a desktop or a laptop, we keep those facing out, where you can't hide in a corner and nobody see what you're doing on a computer or a phone. Our son's computer faces the door. You walk in, you see exactly what he's doing or whatever it is that he's looking at. We have rules that say, Cooper, anytime you want to look at the history on my search engine on Google, you are more than welcome. We don't delete our stuff and clear our browsers. You are welcome to look. There's accountability in that, knowing that Cooper may just decide to use my laptop and he can get on there and look at what I've been doing. So I want to make sure I'm not doing things or looking at things that are unhealthy. So as a father, I want to set that tone. I don't want to be a passive father who just shows up randomly. I want to be involved in their life.
Sorry, I thought I had it covered up.
That's okay. Lack of time. Lack of time. Let's talk about that one for a second. That one of the things, you not just in marriage, not just in family, also in marriage, 4 minutes a day is not enough for you to have time with your kids. Whipping in their room during the halftime of a college football game going, hey, let's hang out for a few minutes, buddy, is probably not the time they need. They need quality time, but quality time comes from quantity time. Meaning you got to give your kids a lot of time because you never know in there when some quality time is going to happen. Meaning events happen in the lives of your kids that you spend with them that you look back and go, those are some of the best times. You never know when that is. Throwing baseballs to my youngest son in a batting cage. Sometimes I was not, man, it's like, that's a lie. I'm so tired. I do not. But he wanted to go do that. And he still talks about, man, you threw me hundreds of balls in a batting cage. Connor, when he was 16 or 17, would come in. We didn't have a lot in common at the time because, man, when your kids hit 16 and 17 years old, their interests are not dad and mom. It is friends and school and fun and everything else. And Connor comes in one day and says, hey, Dad, you know that old Mario game you used to talk about? And I said, yeah, I used to play that back in the 90s. I was really good at it. He said, did you know that you can download that on the Wii now and we could play it? I said, serious? He said, yeah. So we looked and it was there. And he said, oh, it's $13. I said, I'll buy it if you'll play with me. And he said, I will. And we spent the afternoon playing Mario together and having a blast. We laughed harder than we laughed in a long time. Several things I learned that day. Number one, I wasn't nearly as good as I remembered myself being at Mario. Two, I also learned that 16-year-old kids are much better at video games than their 50-year-old dad. I'd get to spots and I'd go, man, I am stuck. And he'll give me that, Dad, I'll get you through this, And I'm like, you hadn't even played this before. How do you make that work like that? But he still talks today about one of the most fun things we ever did was spend an afternoon doing nothing but playing video games. That is so much fun. Add to this, Miss Morgan.
And realize that kids talk on their own time. You can't just go in and say, hey, let's have a conversation. Kids are going to talk when they're ready
Especially
to talk.
teenagers.
Yes.
Teenagers are that way. Little
Yes.
kids, you can pretty much get something out of them, but boy.
Yeah, so be flexible with your time. I can remember just within the last few months being late to a couple of different things because Cooper came in and he just had his chatty pants on, which is kind of a rare thing, and he was just wanting to talk. And so I thought, it's okay. I can be a few minutes late to wherever it was I'm going. He wants to talk and I'm going to listen. Those are rare moments, and so you just learn to be flexible when you've got teens and preteens that don't always open up to mom and dad.
Yeah, I think I asked Lee, I said, where you been? You're like, I lived a few days. She said, Cooper was talking. It was like, oh, okay, all right, great. The kid spoke. When your kids decide to speak and they get to talking, man, you stop and listen because you don't know when it'll start again, right? And so that's really, really important. Give them the time that they need in there. Speaking of talking, that leads right into this next session of a lack of communication is really hard on your family. A lack of communication is really hard on your family. You want to do that first point?
Yeah. When it comes to kids, I'll start there. When our kids would get in the car after school, picking them up, I would say, how was your day? Well, the only answer they're going to give you is, it's okay. So I learned, you've got to be more specific with the questions you ask them if you want to actually get some answers. So we started asking questions like, what did you do today that was fun? What did you do today that you didn't really like or that was hard? Ask specific questions if you want specific answers from your kids. Otherwise, you're just going to get that. It's okay. And then also in our marriage, early in our marriage, Trey and I kind of struggled with this same thing. I stayed home with kids all day, and he'd go to work and come home, and I'd be excited to see him and have conversation. And I would ask him, what'd you do today? And every day I would get the same answer.
Nothing.
Nothing. That's what I got. So, I was young and immature, and I started thinking, well, he's just keeping something from me. He's hiding things from me he doesn't want me to know. But I finally had to make him understand, I'm home with babies and toddlers and changing diapers and watching Barney, and I really just need some adult conversation. I need to catch up with you. And even though I haven't been with you today, if you'll share with me what you did, it makes me feel like I was a little bit a part of your day. So, he had to learn to share some details with me, to open up. He didn't, that wasn't a big need for him, but because it was important to me, he was willing to share what he thought was really boring details of his day. He'd tell me, well, I went and had coffee with Mr. Jones, and then I had to go to the nursing home, and then I studied for a lesson, and I just, I thought that was great to find out what he'd done all day. He thought it was really boring, but he realized it was important to me, so he needed to communicate and share with me.
Yeah, very, very, very good point. And I'm much better. If your wife asks you, guys, how was your day? It was good. What'd you do today? Give them details. It may not make any sense to you, but it makes them, they're interested in what you did, and that's a healthy thing to do. I'm really good about giving details, and I'll be honest. Lee mentioned it. I'll take it one step further. It doesn't have to be your need in order for you to meet that. She needs some communication. She needs some conversation. And if that's a need of hers, it doesn't have to be my need. If I love her enough that if she wants to know how my day was, I'll give her all those details happily because she wants to know. You don't always have to understand why your spouse needs those things that are on their list. You may not even need those things, but if your spouse needs those things, you should be more than happy to give those things on their list because that's very important to you. So make sure you give your spouse and your kids plenty of time. Don't forget to unplug. I love the fact that Matthew and Alex and the church here gave away a lot of board games. Board games are fantastic. Footballs to get out and throw. Some of our favorite moments is, hey, put your phone in your pocket and let's go outside and play pig out in the driveway. Or let's sit down and play cards. I love playing cards. Our family, we started, it was we were making fun of somebody else once that we overheard them going, hey, y'all hang up and hang out, and that became one of our slogans at our house. We're playing cards or we're doing something and we're always like, hey, hang up and hang out. We're having fun here. And we get to saying that all the time, and we're playing cards or we're playing board games and we're visiting about stuff that's just fun. It is healthy to unplug and have a movie night or have a board game night or cards or something along those lines. Cell phones, we always throw this in here because a lot of folks ask, hey, I've got a kid that's 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. They're asking about cell phones. We don't have all the answers. We will tell you how we regulated cell phones with our kids because we think it is important. Our children started with a flip phone. They didn't need to be surfing the internet and have access to absolutely everything. You can put controls on anything these days and see what your kids are doing. But that's back in the old days when we had kids that were that age, they got a flip phone where they could text or call. And they usually got one about 7th grade because we got tired of them borrowing their friends' phones all the time, going, hey, can you come pick me up? And so we would get them a phone and start from there. We reminded all of our children, I am paying for your phone. You remember, we have access to it, meaning we can look at anything we want on your phone. You go, hey, that's my phone. I'm paying for your phone. If you don't want us to look at your phone, you pay for your own phone. We talk about things on our phones. We follow all our kids on social media. We are friends with our children on Snapchat. Any of those, we hear people all the time going, oh, Snapchat, that's horrible. You can do the same thing with Instagram and Facebook that you can with Snapchat. Our family loves doing Snapchats together where you send the little videos to each other of what what you're doing or something along those lines. But we know what they're doing because we're friends with them. We can keep up with them on social media. Those are just kind of our rules, including our adult children. So we have that. We talk about the dangers of cell phones. And I've explained to my sons, you be careful about what you send or what you put on the internet, that you send on social media, because it will be there forever. And it will leave a black eye not only on you, but also on your parents. And so it is important. Lack of communication in every area is good. Keep going, or do you have something you want to add? Keep
just
going.
Another positive as far as communication and cell phones goes is share a calendar. Share a calendar with your spouse.
Good
Trey and I
point.
share calendars, and so we always know, what we've got going on. And if your kids have, phones or old enough to have phones, maybe you just need to create a whole family calendar where you can put all of the activities in there, and everybody can communicate and stay on the same page that way.
We've been trying, having one child at home, we've been trying to keep Cooper updated, and we go through and we go, okay, next weekend, everybody's home, all the kids will be here. The next weekend, we've got this. And so we actually print out a calendar and put it in his room and go, here's where we're going to go. We're going to be in Batesville this weekend, and then next month we're going here. And so it's good to just kind of know and be on the same page as a family. That's an important thing, instead of one of them coming up going, you're going to be gone this weekend? I didn't know that. Number 7, let's talk blended families for just a second, okay? And if you are in a blended family, and this is a very common thing these days, let me give you some tips. Lee comes from a nuclear or traditional family. I actually came from a blended family. My blended family was a little different than most blended families, but I am in a blended family. My father passed from cancer at a young age, and the man that my mother remarried, the wife was killed in a car accident, and we blended a couple of families. And so I can understand some stuff about families. And so I have spent some time not only reading, but also picking the brain of my parents, going, how did you deal with this? What did you do? The number one thing you got to understand about blended families is it is not easy. It is extremely hard. And you've got to be beyond patient. Man, if you go into a new marriage and you blend families and you're thinking, hey, this is easy stuff, and in 6 months everything's going to run smooth, it may take 6 years for everything to run smooth. You're going to have a lot of bumps in the road, and you have to be patient. And sometimes it is not till it's 6 years down the road that you look back and go, hey, it's finally beginning to come together. You're going to think it's not ever going to happen, but it does. You be patient with that. Here's some things on blended families let's throw out there for a second. Understand up front, you need to know this is going to be really, really hard, and it's going to take a lot of time. That it just does not happen overnight, that you put two families together and make them work. And that is so important that you understand that. There's a lot of good resources out there. There's a lot of really great books on blended families. One of them is, remind me again, I just went blank.
The Smart Step Family by Ron Deal. And he has several books that deal with blended families. Blended
families and marriages, how to do marriage in a blended family. Those are very, very good books. Make a plan. Don't come along and go, let's just play it by ear as we go. You know going in, how are we going to handle discipline? How are we going to handle this? How are we going to handle that? And you come up with a plan. One of the most important things you can do is to take a step in your kids' shoes. You're excited about going into a new marriage. Your kids are all of a sudden getting a whole bunch of new family. They're not always excited like you are. You take a second. I'll tell you something else that's really important. Think about this. Your kids have seen one marriage end. It is important for you to model in this marriage how marriage is supposed to work. They need to see that. But you take a second and you look at things from your kids' eyes and standpoint. Bullet point number 4 goes back to the put your spouse first rule of you always have your spouse's back. Always. One of the things that I remember most about the family I grew up in is Dad, Mom would get us if we said anything negative about this new dad that has showed up in this family. You knew. She would say, that's my husband, and you're not going to say that. And if any of those new kids said anything about Mom, Dad would go, Boy, they had one another's backs. And boy, I appreciated knowing it. They modeled how marriage was supposed to work by doing that. And there were a lot of things when you talk about making a plan that they didn't have worked out. I asked one time, I said, did y'all ever not agree on something or not know how to deal with something? I said, because it almost seemed like y'all were always on the same page. And my dad said, we had a rule from day one that if we couldn't figure out how to do something, we would go to the park, which was like right across the street from our house and had a walking trail. He said, we decided we would go to the park and we would walk and talk until we could figure out how to make whatever it was that we weren't agreeing on or whatever this new issue was work. And he said, we wouldn't come home until we had it worked out. And I said, without even thinking, I said, I remember y'all did a lot of walking back early in marriage. And he goes, you're exactly right, but we always came home with a plan. Be specific. Make sure that your kids know what is expected of them. That is really important. Spend time with your kids. Your kids, continue to spend time with your kids and new kids. One of the things that's really important that I think you've got to understand is sometimes in marriage, and it may be somewhere else down the road, sometimes in blended families, we talk about his, mine, and ours. And I personally believe that when you are married, there's no more his, mine, and ours. They are just all ours. That love will always trump DNA. That when you marry someone that has a child, that becomes your child. I was raised in a family with a dad who I consider to be my dad. He's got a son in this world that is his blood son. I am not his blood son. But he has never in any form or fashion treated me any different, loved me any different than he has his son. He has treated me as much like a son as he has his real son. And I have appreciated that. He has modeled what true fatherhood is. There was never well, he's actually my son and you're... No, never, ever did I hear that. Always be respectful to the ex. It is important that you continue to... Your kids need you to not badmouth your ex, their mother, or their father. It is also important to have clear boundaries. Exes can cause problems in marriages. So be real careful that your ex is your ex. They're not your friend. They're not your... You talk about what you need to talk about with kids, but you be respectful to them. You make sure you have clear boundaries. You go, why are you talking about all of this stuff? Because blended families is a huge issue today. And we don't talk about it near enough. Because we always get comments going, we needed more blended family stuff. And I wish we had time to do more. But those are some things that are just basic points that we talk about. Number 8, we visited about this, and we won't talk about it a lot more, but modeling values and integrity. If you don't do that, that's a marriage killer or a family killer. Meaning, you can't tell your kids, hey, we don't lie in this house. We are not people who are dishonest. And somebody knocks on your door on a Sunday afternoon and you look out and you go, oh, I do not want to talk to that person. I do not need a salesman showing up. And you tell your kids, you tell them I'm not home. Because you just told your kids, yes, we do lie in this house. So it is important that you model values and integrity in every form and fashion. Here's some ways. These are all good. Don't lie for your kids. You can't do this. Man, I see this all the time. Man, if your kids, every one of my kids at some point in their high school life rolled over one morning when I stuck my head in the room and said, hey, time to get up. You better get moving or you're not going to make it to class. Every one of my kids at one point or another said, Dad, my first 2 classes are blow-off classes. Can I just sleep in today, please? And I'll go at 10 and you write me a note. And I tell them every time, absolutely. You sleep and I'll be happy to write you a note, but I will write on the note that you chose to sleep in this morning, that you were not sick. Every one of them got up and went to school that morning. I would not lie for my children. Not gonna do it. If you want to ruin your kids, don't give them rules. They need rules. I thought it was interesting. Saw a statistic the other day that said 76% of all college students said their parents were not strict enough on them. 76% of all college students said their parents were not strict enough on them. Your kids need rules. They need curfews. They need to be reminded, here's what you do, here's what you don't do, over and over and over. When your kids get in trouble, sometimes, get this, I know this is going to be a whole new idea for a lot of people out there. Sometimes when your kids get in trouble, you know why they got in trouble? Because they did something wrong. Things have changed a lot. When I was in high school and I got sent to the principal's office, yes, that did happen. And they would call my mom and they would go, Miss Morgan, your son is in the principal's office, is Mr. Martin, and I need to give him 3 swats. I need your permission to do that. Let me tell you what my mom never said. Not one time did my mom say, oh, not my son, surely not. Somebody was probably trying to get him in trouble. Which teacher was it? Because I'd like to have a conference with them because my son wouldn't do. You know what she'd say every time? You whip him and you tell him when he gets home, I'm going to whip him again. And I remember thinking, man, that is the last thing that I wanted to hear my mom say every time. We live in a society now that if your kids gets in trouble, it's like, well, I'm going to call my lawyer. I'm going to call your boss. I'm going to call the principal, and I'm going to get you in trouble. I'll call the superintendent's office. My kid can't do. Sometimes your kid gets in trouble, and sometimes they need to reap what they sow. Sometimes when they make mistakes, don't think the police are out to get them. Don't think everybody's out to get my kid. Sometimes they just make mistakes. Don't threaten your kid with discipline and then don't discipline them. If you've told your young one, hey, you do that again, I'm going to whip you, don't tell them that or you whip them. If you've told your son or your daughter, if you do that again, I'm going to take your cell phone or the keys to your car, you need to back up what you say. Now, I try not to judge people in any form or fashion, and I don't know why people do what they do, and I'm not judging this woman in any form or fashion, but this poor mama the other day at Target, oh my, she had a little one about the age of 3 in her basket, and he was wearing her out. She told him, you get back out of that basket and I will bust you. She put him in that basket in less than 30 seconds. He was out of that basket. 4 times she said that. Now, what I wanted to do was go over and say, I will be happy to hold him for you if you would like to whip him. But he was kind of like, I don't care. But again, he may have been the conner in that family and the strong-willed child, and it was not my place. But I just kept thinking, quit telling him you're going to whip him, because he just was going to keep doing it until you did. Don't threaten that. And then, of course, make God a priority in their life. A couple of more. Don't pull strings to get them out of trouble. Don't pull strings to get them out of trouble. I said this a while ago, if your kid does something wrong, sometimes you got to reap what you sow. Our kids have gotten in trouble. Got a call one time from the principal. He is a friend of mine. I was trying to figure out why he's calling me from the school phone instead of his cell phone. And he said, Mr. Morgan. And I thought, uh-oh. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I have your son in the office in here. And I said, what has he done today? And he said, we were testing and they were told they were not allowed to take their phones out until everyone was through testing. And he finished and put his up and pulled out his phone to send a text message and was caught. Now, what I could have said was, but he was through. What is that going to hurt? But that wasn't the rule. And I said, what is the price that he needs to pay for doing what he was told not to do? He said, 3 days ISS because we were taking state tests. That is not our rule, that's a state test that no kid in class is supposed to have out a phone at any moment until everyone in the room is done. And I said, send him. That's the rules. Make sure he pays the price. Sometimes you just got to let your kids learn. They're not going to learn if you don't let them. In Childress, we have a curfew. The city sets it. Man, it's always been. Kids that grow up in Childress think everybody's got curfews. We don't tell them that, no, they don't. If you're under 18, you got to be home. You can't be on the street after 11 o'clock. And then on the weekends, it's 12 o'clock. And so that really works good for us. My kids always say, what time do I got to be in? When's curfew? Be there by that time. One time, one of our sons sends a text message, about 11:30, said, we're over watching movies with a bunch of church kids, and it lacks an hour. Can I be late? And I said, Parker? I said, you know when curfew is? And he goes, man, nobody gets in trouble. Nobody ever gets pulled over for being out past. Guess who gets pulled over that night for being out past curfew? He comes in at 12:30. He's hot. Oh, he is so mad. Got pulled over he said, some bogus didn't turn on my blinker thing, and got a ticket out past curfew. I told him, I said, go to bed. We'll talk about it in the morning. My first thought was, I will call my friend Jay Maiden, who is the judge. Actually, I don't even have to call him. I'll just send him a text. I will tell him we were off. Parker was watching movies at church friends. It was a church thing. And I have no doubt Jay will say, throw that thing in the trash. I'll take care of it. Mama, a little smarter. She thinks things through. Said, but will he learn anything from that if you do that? I said, probably not. So we told Parker the next day, said, here's what we're going to do. We gave you permission to stay out, but you asked, and you did. So we'll pay half of whatever that ticket is. So we went down on Monday, and we saw Judge Jay, and we paid half. We paid $60. Parker paid $60. And for a 17-year-old kid who pushes mowers in the hot Texas sun to make money, $60 is a lot of money. And we let him pay his half of the fine. I will tell you, because you already know, guess how many times that boy missed curfew the rest of his days at home? Absolutely zero. Because he learned a lesson. Don't pull strings to get your kids out of trouble. Be consistent, no double standards, strive to be their parent more than their friend, and don't make your kids out to think you're perfect. Meaning, if you make a mistake, it's hard. I've done that. I've had to go tell my kids, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. I lost my cool. Don't let your kids think you're perfect. If you do, then they're going to think, I'll grow up and I don't have to apologize someday. So, yeah. Make sure that you're modeling those values and integrity. You got anything you want to add to this before we move on? All righty. Let's talk about discipline for just a moment. Let's talk about discipline because that's part of the family. And of course, we know that we discipline people differently. You can't discipline you want to discipline a 15-year-old? Take his phone. We kind of remember back the day when we said, hey, put your keys or put your phone on the bar and I'll just keep it for a couple of weeks. And I think one of my kids said, but can you just whip me? It'd be a whole lot less painful. And so learn what it is that gets to your kids. We said this last night. There's a huge difference between discipline and abuse. Make sure you don't discipline them when you're mad. You cool off. Understand, you don't get to discipline your children just because you're mad at them. That's not, the thing for discipline is you're disciplining to correct behavior, not to get even with them. So whether they've embarrassed you, whatever it is that they've done, you cool off and clear your mind before you administer discipline, whether it's corporal punishment or grounding them from whatever it is. Discipline them for willful disobedience, for climbing out of the basket when you said, don't you climb out of that basket again. That's willful disobedience, not childishness. A kid that knocks over his milk glass at the table had an accident. And as frustrating as that is to knock over 2 inches of milk in a glass and you have to clean up 2 gallons is what it seems like, that was a childish thing, not a direct disobedience. Don't wait too late to start. Lee mentioned a while ago, personalities and life are kind of set in order by what age?
By about 5.
By about 5. And so you start early telling those little kids, no. Sometimes that little swat, no. You know why you discipline your kids? You discipline them because you love them. You love them. You're not trying to be a mean parent. You're trying to keep them from hurting themselves. And don't wait too late to start. Our oldest, when he was a baby, we used to go through, I thought it was kind of cute. We used to go through the list, what does a duck say, and what does a chicken say, and what does a horse say? And one time I said, and what does mama say? And he said, no. Because mama started early at times going, no, we're not going to do that. Understand when you need corporal punishment versus verbal abuse. Now, this is kind of tough. If you got multiple kids in your home, you understand that sometimes if you have a strong-willed child, it's going to take a little corporal punishment. I'm going to swat him on the rear end to get his attention. One lady with Connor, our strong-willed child, when he was a little lady, sweet lady at church, she was trying her best to help, and I know it, and I was okay with it. She said, have you ever tried Dr. Dobson's strong-willed child book on him? And I said, I beat him with it all the time, and it hasn't helped. Some kids need a little bit of swat. That's why God put that rear end back there for you to swat it, all right? And then we've had kids that I could look cross-eyed at and go, you have disappointed me so much. And I just ripped their heart out and stomped it. Understand that there's different ways to discipline your children and use the one that works the best for that situation. Don't be inconsistent. You cannot say, all right, you are grounded for lying, and then 2 weeks later, if they do it again, go, all right, we'll let this one. No, you got to be consistent with your discipline. Don't discipline out of anger. We said that. Explain why you're disciplined. This one drove me nuts because we always had a kid that would say, "But why? Why am I in trouble for this? Why?" And I would do my best to explain. What I always said that I would never say. When I was young, I would go, I will never say to my kids, because I said so. I would never say that. And then I decided there is a time when you have done your best to explain why you're being disciplined. Here is why you're being disciplined. And then they still say, but I don't understand why I'm being disciplined. And then you go, because I said so. And I remember thinking, I've turned into my mom, Sometimes after you've explained it, there is a time to say, because I'm your parent and because I said so. But try to explain why it is they're being disciplined. Always err on the side of grace. Always. Meaning, you go, man, I am just not sure what I should do on this. Be graceful. We want God to err on the side of grace with us, don't we? Err on the side of grace when it comes to your kids as well. Finally, man, we took this picture in about 2002, I think is probably when this was taken. To me, that just seems like a few years ago. 2002. Man, they were so little and so young. You're looking at about 6th grade and 4th grade and kindergarten and baby at home. And we blinked twice. And it turned into this. And all of a sudden your kids are off and gone. And I will tell you, one of the greatest things in this world is watching your children fly on their own, to make a life on their own, to do things. Boy, when you let that arrow go and it flies like we talked about last night, I love watching my boys do life. Love watching them get married. I'm going to love watching them be a parent someday. But man, it goes by. If you've got little ones at home, man, you're going to blink a couple times. You don't have a long time. You do a good job aiming those arrows in the right direction because they grow up fast. All right, I think that is it. I got a homework assignment for you. If you'll look on the back page, here's what we'll do. Oh, talk about perfect timing. Here's a 5-day challenge for you. A little bit different than our 5-day marriage challenge. 5-day challenge. Number 1, for the next 5 days, no criticism in the family. Work to not be a critic. Now, if you need to tell your kids, hey, y'all got to get that room picked up. Company's coming over. You know, we didn't mention this, but pick your battles when it comes to things that are important and not important. Meaning, for a long time, it was like, you know, we just kind of wanted our kids to pick their room up every night. And it was like a huge battle every stinking night. And we finally decided, we'll just shut their door. Then they can clean the room on Saturday, you know. And we would tell them, all right, you don't have to pick up the room, but Saturday we're cleaning house. So we decided to pick our battles. And so that's really important, to pick your battles. Now, we would tease them sometimes, and I would tell them, I said, I know I saw roaches leaving your room this morning with suitcases going, we can't live like this anymore, so we got to clean this house today, boys. We got to get in there and do something. But pick your battles of what is important and not important. My kids, man, through high school, I had a couple of kids that decided they wanted their hair really long. Now, when I say really long, it wasn't super long. But I looked at them and thought, man, that kid needs a stinking haircut. But you know what? They were good kids. And I really could care less about their hair as long as they were good kids. So there are certain things you got to pick your battle on. You know, and if they're going to be a good kid, I'll live with long hair or this or that. So learn to pick them battles, but don't be a critic. Is there something this week you might need to go? Hey, you got to get your homework done. That's being a parent. But don't be a critic this week, okay? Work on that. No criticism at all this week. Number 2, spend 30 minutes in conversation each day with electronics turned off for 5 days. Now, this is with your spouse, or try to plan sometime this week to sit down and play some board games or watch a movie with your kids. If you have a movie night, turn the phone off. Set the phone down. You don't have to surf on your phone while you're watching a movie. Number 3, if you are married, I think it would be good for your spouse and for your kids. But write your spouse a sweet note. Every day send them a sweet text message. That's easy. You got your spouse is worth 3. Let's make it 5 seconds. I can send a text in about 5 seconds. Your spouse is worth 5 seconds of your time to send them a text and say, I love you today, something along them lines. Leave your kid a Post-it note. Put a note in their sack lunch. Write a note on their mirror. I left a note on my son's mirror before I left and said, I am proud of you. You're a good kid. You work on doing that this week. Find opportunities to leave notes for your kids and for your spouse. Number 4, have a family night this week. Play hide and seek. I guarantee you, hide and seek. All our kids are coming home next weekend. We're excited about it. We'll have the whole crew in. All of them. If I brought up, hey, let's play hide and seek, every one of them would go, yeah, that sounds like fun. Now, we would wreck that house. But I mean, you got 6'7" kids trying to hide in a closet. That ain't going to happen anymore. But I guarantee you, it's amazing what your kids find is fun and still fun if you'll just spend some time playing. So work on some of those right there. Look over those family game nights and all that kind of stuff. So we got 2 giveaways. And actually, I think I saw Alex leaving. He went down the hall. So you're the giveaway man now. I think we got a couple of giveaways, and I'm gonna let Matthew do his thing, and then I'm gonna close. Can I close with a prayer?
Yes,
okay. All right, and then we'll close with a prayer.